Hey everybody, welcome to August. We're going to talk about the books that I read back in July, one of which you guys voted on out there, as well as the books that I plan to read this month of August. So let's kick it off, shall we? The first one I finished was Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay. I was first introduced to Paul Tremblay with his book Head Full of Ghosts, and it was horror like I'd never read before. He has a very signature style. If you're not familiar with it, it's kind of an ambiguity. At the very end, well, throughout the entire book, you're kind of confronted with, is this paranormal? It feels very paranormal. It feels strange. And then by the end of the book, you're kind of like, I don't know. It could go either way. Now, granted, all of his books haven't completely been structured that way. This one kind of broke that rule. And it was pretty exciting to see him shift his style. This is kind of a riff on the cursed movie genre, just like something like The Ring. However, that's not how it plays out. Basically, the story is back in the 90s, these kids, it's two girls and two guys, and one of the guys is the narrator for the story. They script and shoot this incredibly, very, very low budget, very indie film, but it never gets finished. It never gets put out into the wild. There's some scenes that are put up on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. And let's just say some very terrible things happen to the people involved, except the narrator. Well, I guess that depends on how you look at it. So rush forward to the present. The narrator is trying to get this movie remade into an actual film as opposed to just being a collection of scenes on the internet. What's cool about this book is it's flip-flopping between back then and now as he's trying to get this film made. But what's really cool about it is parts of the story are formatted in script form. So it's kind of creating this sense of atmosphere where you're like, am I reading the script as written, or is this how the events played out? And it's kind of a blend of both, and I really appreciate his approach that way. I'm always fascinated by authors who take a different approach with how they structure something in terms of the prose itself on the page, because we're so accustomed to just text upon text upon text, where it really brings something new and exciting to a book when the format itself changes. But like I said, it wasn't just a visual style. It kind of created this sense of confusion. It had me second guessing myself the entire time. However, I will say the ending is not a signature Paul Tremblay ending, but I really did like it. But a review on that one, it should be coming very soon. The next book I read was one that had been topping the charts of my polls, suggested numerous times, and that is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, which is a romance novel. I read a romance novel. This is the first official romance novel I read. Now, I did read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, but while that had romance elements in it, it felt like a romance novel masquerading as a fantasy, masquerading as a young adult novel. It was kind of this weird mishmash. Oh yeah, of course you can't leave out the terrible, terrible trope and trend I can't stand, which is academia. But this book, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, is a straight up romance novel with a little bit of a spin on things. It brings some darker commentary, some darker content to the story itself, and that is domestic violence. And I'm not gonna lie, I had a great time reading this book. This was maybe not in the way that Colleen Hoover wanted me to have a great time, but I was never bored. I laughed out loud numerous times. And if you remember my review with The Fourth Wing, I was really, really bored in that book. It's a much longer book than this one, but there's kind of this Act 2 middle part that just stagnates completely. It Ends With Us, not so much. Yes, there's a lot of romance cheese in it, but I found it oddly entertaining. But who knows, maybe this is gonna be a shift for the channel. I'm just gonna read romance novels now. I'm just kidding. But, I'm open to it. I think it's important to read things that you know aren't written for you, especially when you're someone like me who's interested in writing craft and getting better at writing. But don't worry, I will give it a full review. Just know that I hate to admit it, but I kind of had a good time with it. All right, the third book I read, if you're following along with my read along anyway, you'll know this already. That's Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. Reading it very closely this time with a group of you out there. So thanks again for reading along with me. I always love creating conversations around books. 10 out of 10. Better than I remember. I wouldn't change a word. Perfect book. I don't know if I should do an official review or not, but if you'd like to see an official review, let me know down in the comments below. It's just, to me, it's what fiction should be. It's taking the atmosphere, the setting, the characterization, everything is this beautiful meld. It doesn't feel like a bunch of disparate parts. It doesn't feel like a character so separated from the environment she finds herself in. It feels just like everything was meant to be. And it's such a great exploration, not just of government cover-ups, of course, but like relationships, psychology, humanity itself. And so I can't say enough good things about this book, which is why I'm not sure if I'm going to review it or not, but there it is. I love it. If you haven't read it yet, highly recommend it. And in fact, I would love for you to go back and read along with me because those will always be up there. And like I said, I read it so much more carefully than I did in the past because of this video series. So I think you're going to get a lot out of it. All right, the fourth and final book that I read was My Death by Lisa Tuttle. This is a book that was voted on in polls. Came out of nowhere for me. It's a very short book. I didn't know what it was. I went in blind. I just saw the suggestion, put it in the poll. You guys voted on it, and I really enjoyed it too. It's, like I said, only 100 pages long. Man, it's really hard to classify this book because it's, I don't want to call it horror, but it does have psychological horror elements to it. It's about this woman. She's a writer. She feels uninspired, and so she decides to write a biography about this woman who was a muse to a painter and subsequently jumped out of a window after having a relationship with him. Anyway, she was a very interesting individual. And so the narrator decides to write a biography. It involves her, of course, meeting this lady, and she's like 96 or something like that, so very, very old. And they have these conversations, and she starts to see a parallel between this woman's life and her own life. And so that's where the psychological element comes in. I really liked it, steeped in atmosphere, takes place in Scotland, beautiful setting. So thank you for the suggestion, and thank you for picking that one. I really enjoyed it. And of course, a review will be coming for that one as well. All right, it's time to talk about August, everybody. I had a couple books that I wanted to read in my quote unquote new book read of each month, but the one you guys voted on was The Book of Elsewhere by Keanu Reeves and China Miéville. I've never read China before. To my understanding, Keanu Reeves did not write a word in this book. It's all him. However, Keanu Reeves came up with a character, which is, it's going to sound cheesy, but I was intrigued because, not so much because Keanu is involved, well, maybe a little bit, but I've never read China's work before, and somebody out there has been bugging me time and time and time again. I'm looking at you, Britain. The world that Keanu has created is about this 80,000-year-old guy. He can't die. His mom's like an alien or something. It sounds out there. It sounds like something a 13-year-old would have come up with. But I want to see that idea paired with a master writer. I want to see how that unfolds. So that will be my first book, The Book of Elsewhere by Keanu Reeves and China Miéville. All right, book 2 is another request that has topped the charts numerous times in my polls, but has never been chosen, so I'm going to choose it myself, and that is The Drop by Dennis Lehane, or Dennis Lehane, depending on who you talk to. This was submitted by Britain as well, some okie dude, twice, and it didn't quite make it, but I feel like it's time to finally read Dennis Lehane. I've seen plenty of the movies his fiction has been based on, but never read a single book, so now it's going to happen. I don't know what it's about. I didn't even look at it. I'm sure it's about crime of some kind. There's a gun on the cover, so I'm excited to read that one as kind of a genre shift away from science fiction. Which brings us back to science fiction horror. The third book I'm reading, actually reading it right now, it's Authority by Jeff Vandermeer. It's book 2 in the Southern Reach trilogy. I've talked about this in the read-along, but I'm enjoying it, but it doesn't have the same magic that Annihilation did. And it's funny because I know numerous people out there have said that they prefer Authority to Annihilation because of the political intrigue, I guess. But so far, so good. If you're not familiar, it's surrounding a POV character named Control, who is brought into the Southern Reach, the clandestine government organization, who is just stationed outside of Area X, and he's trying to fix things. He's trying to figure out what the hell's going on. So even though you're inside the institution, you're in the POV of an outsider, so you still have that air of mystery and atmosphere and just confusion. Liking it so far, about a third in, I believe, at the time of this recording. So what's the fourth book I'm going to read this month, everybody? That's up to you. So you know how it goes. Comment your pick down below in the comments, and whichever of the top 5 have the most upvotes, so don't forget about that, will be included in a poll for you and everybody out there to vote on. But anyway, let me know, what did you read last month? Anything that I need to know about, or what are you planning on reading this month? And I look forward to your picks down in the comments. So thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me. And I will see you guys in the next one.